beam of light leaves a star, crosses billions of kilometers, and reaches your eyes. That's the story we all accept. But here's the part that breaks everything you think you know. What if that journey never actually happened the way we picture it? What if light does not travel like an object moving through space at all? It sounds impossible, because light is known as the fastest thing in the universe, moving at a fixed speed that nothing can surpass. Yet, from the point of view of light itself, there is no movement, no time passing, no distance being covered. It reaches its destination instantly, not fast, but immediate. This is not science fiction. This is a real consequence of the laws of physics, and once you understand it, your idea of motion, time, and reality begins to shift in a way that feels almost unreal. And hidden inside this idea is an experiment that quietly forced scientists to rethink space and time themselves. An experiment that did not just measure light, but revealed something deeper about the structure of the universe. Light behaves in ways that break common sense. It acts like a wave, spreading out through space, but also like a particle, hitting surfaces in tiny packets. It never slows down in empty space, never speeds up, never changes its fundamental behavior. No matter how fast you chase it, it always moves away from you at the same exact speed. This one fact alone created a crisis in physics, because it should not be possible. If you run toward something, it should approach you faster. If you move away, it should seem slower. That's how motion works for everything else, but not for light. Light refuses to follow those rules. Instead, the universe bends its own structure to protect this single constant speed. Time stretches, distance shrinks, reality adjusts itself just to keep light unchanged. That is not just a detail. That is a clue that light is not just moving through reality, it is shaping it. Now here is where things get even more intense. At the exact speed of light, something strange happens to time. It stops completely. For anything traveling at that speed, there is no ticking clock, no before and after, no sense of duration. At the same time, distance collapses. The space between 2 points shrinks down to nothing. So when light leaves a distant galaxy and arrives here, from its own perspective, those two events are the same moment. No journey, no passage, just a single instant. This idea is not easy to accept because it goes against everything built into human experience. Every second of your life is defined by time moving forward and space separating things. But light exists outside that experience. It does not live inside time the way you do. And that changes everything. There is also a hidden experiment behind this idea that most people never think about deeply. It did not involve massive machines or dramatic explosions. It was simple, almost quiet, yet its result forced a complete rewrite of physics. Scientists tried to detect differences in the speed of light based on Earth's motion through space. They expected to see variations, small changes depending on direction, but the result came back the same every single time. Light speed never changed, not even slightly. This forced a shocking conclusion. Space and time themselves must be flexible. They must adjust in order to keep the speed of light constant. That realization led to a new understanding of reality, one where time can slow down, lengths can contract, and events can shift depending on motion. And right at the center of all of it is light, acting not just as a traveler, but as a rule that the universe cannot break. This video is going to take you deeper into that idea, step by step, in a way that is clear and easy to follow, but also powerful enough to make you question what you thought was obvious. You will understand how light can move across the universe, yet never experience movement at all. You will see why time stops at the speed of light and what that really means. You will learn about the experiment that forced scientists to accept this reality, even when it seemed impossible. And most importantly, you will see how this changes the way we think about everything, from motion to distance to the nature of existence itself. These are not just abstract concepts. They are real, tested, and deeply connected to how the universe works at its most fundamental level. Stay with this until the end, because the final idea brings everything together in a way that is both simple and deeply unsettling. It suggests that what we call movement might not be what we think it is, and that the universe may not be built on objects traveling through space, but on relationships between time and distance that shift and bend in ways we are only beginning to understand. Each part of this builds on the last, and missing even a small piece will leave the picture incomplete. By the time you reach the end, the way you look at light will never be the same again. Welcome to the channel, where we break down complex ideas into simple truths and explore the hidden side of reality. If you are ready to see the universe from a completely different perspective, make sure to subscribe and stay with us, because this is just the beginning. The picture most people carry in their mind feels simple and obvious. Light is treated like a tiny object, like a fast bullet, shooting through empty space from one place to another. It leaves a source, travels across a distance, and finally reaches a target. That idea feels natural because everything in daily life behaves that way. A ball is thrown, a car moves down a road, a plane crosses the sky. Motion always means something is here, then it moves, and then it arrives somewhere else after some time has passed. So it feels easy to place light into that same category. It becomes just another fast traveler, only much faster than anything else. In this picture, space is like a stage, and light is an actor moving across it. The path is clear, the direction is clear, and the journey takes time. This belief is so common that it rarely gets questioned. It feels complete, it feels enough. But the deeper physics goes, the more this picture begins to crack. Because when scientists tried to measure light more carefully, when they tested how it behaves under different conditions, the simple idea of light as a tiny moving object stopped working. It did not fail in a small way, it failed completely. The behavior of light refused to fit into that model. And once that happened, the entire understanding of motion had to be rebuilt from the ground up. Light does not behave like a normal object. It does not follow the same rules that everything else follows. When it is tested, it shows a dual nature that feels almost impossible to accept at first. In some situations, it behaves like a wave, spreading out, interfering with itself, creating patterns that only waves can create. In other situations, it behaves like a particle, hitting surfaces in small, discrete packets, as if it is made of tiny units. These two behaviors do not fit together in a simple way. Waves and particles are very different ideas, yet light seems to be both at the same time. This is not just a strange detail. It is a sign that light does not belong to the same category as everyday objects. It exists in a way that is deeper and more complex than the simple bullet-like picture suggests. And as this understanding grew, another even more surprising idea began to appear. Light does not experience time the way everything else does. Time, which feels like the most basic part of reality, does not apply to light in the same way. For objects with mass, time always moves forward. Clocks tick, moments pass, events follow one after another. But as something moves faster and faster, approaching the speed of light, time begins to slow down for that object. This is not a guess. It has been tested and confirmed again and again. The faster something moves, the slower its time passes, compared to a stationary observer. And when that speed reaches the speed of light, the equation shows something extreme. Time stops completely. This leads to a strange and powerful idea. If time does not pass for light, then from its own perspective, there is no duration between the moment it is created and the moment it is absorbed. There is no journey in the usual sense. What looks like a long path to an outside observer becomes a single instant for light itself. The beginning and the end collapse into one moment. This is difficult to accept because it removes the idea of travel entirely. Travel depends on time passing. Without time, there is no motion as we understand it. And yet light still connects distant points in space. It still moves from stars to planets, from one side of the universe to the other. So there is a tension between what we see and what the deeper laws are telling us. From the outside, light clearly travels. From its own perspective, it does not. This is where the common belief starts to break apart. The idea of light as a tiny object racing through space is no longer enough. Something more subtle is happening. The core idea that emerges from this is both simple and deeply unsettling. At the speed of light, not only does time stop, but distance also changes. Space itself is affected by motion. As an object moves faster, lengths in the direction of motion begin to shrink. This effect is extremely small at everyday speeds, so it goes unnoticed. But as the speed approaches the speed of light, the shrinking becomes more extreme, and at the exact speed of light, the distance in the direction of motion collapses completely. It becomes zero. This means that from light's perspective, there is no distance between where it starts and where it ends. The 2 points are the same. So while an observer sees light traveling across a vast distance over a period of time, light itself experiences no distance and no time. This leads to a powerful shift in thinking. Light is not moving through space in the way we imagine. Instead, space and time are adjusting in such a way that light's speed remains constant. The journey is not something that light experiences. It is something that exists only from the outside point of view. This brings us to a deeper understanding of motion itself. Motion is usually thought of as an object changing position over time. But if time can slow down and even stop, and if distance can shrink and even disappear, then motion is not as simple as it seems. It depends on the relationship between space and time, not just on an object moving through a fixed background. Light reveals this relationship in the most extreme way possible. It shows that space and time are not separate things. They are connected, and they can change depending on how fast something is moving. This idea did not come easily. It was forced into physics by experiments that refused to give any other answer. There is an experiment that stands at the center of this shift, one that is often mentioned but not always fully appreciated. Scientists wanted to measure how light behaves when the observer is moving. They expected that the speed of light would change depending on the motion of the observer, just as the speed of any other object would. If you move towards something, it should appear faster. If you move away, it should appear slower. This is a basic rule of motion. But when they performed the experiment, the result was not what they expected. The speed of light remained exactly the same in all directions, regardless of how the observer was moving. This was not a small difference that could be ignored. It was a clear and consistent result that could not be explained by the existing theories. Something fundamental had to change. To understand this result, scientists developed a simple but powerful idea called a light clock. It is a thought experiment that helps show how time behaves at high speeds. Imagine a beam of light bouncing between two mirrors. Each bounce marks a unit of time. For someone at rest, the light moves straight up and down between the mirrors. But for someone moving relative to the clock, the light follows a longer, angled path because the clock is moving sideways while the light travels. Since the speed of light must remain constant, the only way to explain the longer path is that time itself is passing more slowly for the moving clock. This simple idea leads directly to time dilation, the slowing down of time at high speeds. And when this is extended to the speed of light, it leads to the conclusion that time stops completely. The same reasoning applies to space. If the speed of light is always constant, then distances must adjust as well. This leads to length contraction, where objects become shorter in the direction of motion as their speed increases. These effects are not optional. They are required to keep the speed of light the same for all observers. This is the key point. Light does not change its speed to fit space and time. Space and time change to fit light. This is a complete reversal of the common way of thinking. Instead of light moving through a fixed reality, reality itself is flexible and adjusts around light. This leads to a reality check that changes how everything is understood. Space and time are not fixed backgrounds. They are dynamic and interconnected. They form a structure that can stretch, shrink, and bend depending on motion. Light sits at the center of this structure as a constant that cannot be broken. It is not just another object in the universe. It is a limit, a rule, a boundary that shapes how everything else behaves. When something moves close to the speed of light, it begins to reveal this deeper structure. Time slows down, distances shrink, and the usual rules of motion begin to break. At the exact speed of light, these effects reach their extreme form. Time stops, distance collapses, and the idea of a journey disappears. This brings the focus back to a simple but powerful statement. If light does not experience time, then the moment it is emitted and the moment it is absorbed are the same moment from its perspective. There is no gap between them, no duration, no passage. What appears as a long trip across space is for light a single point in its existence. This does not mean that the journey is not real for an outside observer. It clearly is. But it shows that reality depends on the frame of reference. What is long and extended in one frame can be instant and collapsed in another. Light represents the extreme case where the usual concepts of time and distance no longer apply in the way we expect. The deeper implication of this idea continues to unfold the more it is examined. Motion, time, and distance are not absolute. They depend on how things are moving relative to each other. Light, by always moving at the same speed, forces these relationships to adjust in a very specific way. It acts as a kind of anchor for the structure of reality. Without this constant speed, space and time would not behave the way they do. The consistency of light's speed is what makes the structure of space-time stable and predictable. It is what allows the laws of physics to work the same way everywhere in the universe. As this understanding develops, the original picture of light as a tiny object moving through space becomes less and less useful. It is replaced by a more subtle idea where light is part of the structure of reality itself. It is not just traveling through space. It is connected to the way space and time are defined. This does not make the concept of motion meaningless, but it changes its meaning. Motion is no longer just about objects moving through space over time. It is about how space and time relate to each other, and how those relationships change under different conditions. The thought that light does not experience its own journey continues to challenge intuition. It suggests that the separation between events is not as fixed as it seems. 2 points that are far apart in space and time for one observer can be the same point for another, depending on how they are moving. This does not mean that anything can happen or that the universe is chaotic. The laws are very precise and consistent, but they allow for a flexibility that goes far beyond everyday experience. Light is the key to seeing that flexibility. The idea keeps building, layer by layer, without closing or settling into a final answer, because each part leads to another question, another shift in perspective, another adjustment in how reality is understood. And the more it is explored, the more it becomes clear that light is not just something that moves, but something that reveals the deeper rules of existence. And those rules continue to unfold without reaching a simple end. Maybe the problem was never light. Maybe the problem was the way motion has always been understood. Everything in daily life teaches that movement is simple. Something starts here, then it goes there, and time flows in between. But light refuses to follow that story. It breaks it quietly, without noise, without warning, and replaces it with something far more complex and far more interesting. The closer this idea is examined, the more it feels like motion is not a basic feature of reality, but a result of something deeper, not objects traveling through space, but space and time adjusting around relationships that are constantly shifting. What feels solid and fixed begins to look flexible. What feels obvious begins to feel incomplete. And right at the center of all of it, light stands as a boundary that cannot be crossed, a constant that cannot be changed, shaping the rules without ever explaining itself fully. This leads to a bigger thought that stays in the mind long after the video ends. Maybe the universe is not built on things moving from one place to another. Maybe it is built on connections, on how events relate to each other across space and time. Maybe what is seen as motion is just the surface of something deeper, something that only begins to appear when pushed to its limits. And when that limit is reached, when speed becomes absolute, time fades, distance collapses, and the idea of a journey disappears completely. That is where intuition stops working, and a different kind of understanding begins to take shape. Not clear, not complete, but enough to show that reality is far more strange than it appears on the surface. And light sits there as a quiet clue, not explaining everything, but pointing in a direction that suggests there is more to discover, more to question, more to rethink. It does not give easy answers. It creates better questions. And those questions pull deeper into the structure of reality, where the familiar starts to dissolve and something new begins to emerge, slowly, piece by piece. If this shifted the way reality feels even a little, if it made simple ideas like motion and time feel less certain, then stay connected. Subscribe to the channel, because each video goes further into these hidden layers, step by step, without rushing past the details that matter. Like the video if this opened a new way of thinking, and share it with someone who enjoys questioning the world at a deeper level. Because the deeper this journey goes, the stranger it becomes, and this is only the beginning.